types: structural failure due to high loads or metal fatigue of the wing structure, failure of the powered flight controls, failure of thewing down panels leading to explosive decompression, or fire and other engine problems. The committee concluded that fire was the most likely cause of the problem, and changes were made to the aircraft to protect the engines and wings from damage that might lead to another fire. 103. The cost of solving the Comet mystery must be reckoned neither in money nor in manpower. Prime Minister Winston Churchill 1954. 104. During the investigation, the Royal Navy conducted recovery operations. 105. First pieces of wreckage were discovered on the 12th of February 1954, 106, and the search continued until September 1954, by which time 70% by weight of the main structure, 80% of the power section, and 50% of the aircraft's system sound equipment had been recovered. 107, 108. The forensic reconstruction effort had just begun when the Abel Committee reported its findings. No apparent fault in the aircraft was found, N19, and the British government decided against opening a further public inquiry into the accident. 102. The prestigious nature of Comet project, particularly for the British aerospace industry, and the financial impact of the aircraft's grounding on Bork's operations both served to pressure the inquiry to end without further investigation. 102. Comet flights resumed on 23 March 1954. 109. On the 8th of April 1954, Comet GALYY, Yoke, on charter to South African Airways, was on a leg from Rome to Cairo, of a longer route, Flight 201 from London to Johannesburg, when it crashed in the Mediterranean near Naples with loss of all 21 passengers and crew on board. 98. The Comet fleet was immediately grounded once again and a large investigation board was formed under the direction of the Royal Aircraft Establishment, RAE. 98. Prime Minister Winston Churchill tasked the Royal Navy with helping to locate and retrieve the wreckage so that the cause of the accident could be determined. 110. The Comet's certificate of airworthiness was revoked, and Comet 1 line production was suspended at the Hatfield factory while the BOAC fleet was permanently grounded, cocooned and stored. 88. Cohen Committee Court of Inquiry. Bork Comet 1 cocooned and stored in the maintenance area at London Heathrow Airport in September 1954. On the 19th of October 1954, the Cohen Committee was established to examine the causes of the Comet crashes. 111. Chaired by Lord Cohen, the committee tasked an investigation team led by Sir Arnold Hall, director of the RAE at Farnborough, to perform a more detailed investigation. Hall's team began considering fatigue as the most likely cause of both accidents and initiated further research into measurable strain on the aircraft's skin. 98. With their recovery of large sections of GALYP from the Elba crash and Bork's donation of an identical airframe, GRU, for further examination, an extensive water torture test eventually provided conclusive results. 112. This time, the entire fuselage was tested in a dedicated water tank that was built specifically at Farnborough to accommodate its full length. 102. Image from the Cohen Inquiry report showing fuselage failure under water pressure test of Comet 1 GRU. Note: intact escape hatch window frame in water tank testing. Engineers subjected GRU to repeated repressurization and overpressurization, and on the 24th of June 1954, after 3,057 flight cycles, 1,221 actual and 1,836 simulated, 113. GRU burst open. Hall, Geoffrey de Havilland and Bishop were immediately called to the scene. where the water tank was drained to reveal that the fuselage had ripped open at a bolt hole, forward off forward left escape hatch cut out. The failure then occurred longitudinally along a fuselage stringer at the widest point of the fuselage and through a cutout for an escape hatch. The skin thickness was discovered to be insufficient to distribute the load across the structure, leading to overloading of fuselage frames adjacent to fuselage cutouts. Cohen Inquiry Accident Report Fig 7.114. The fuselage frames did not have sufficient strength to prevent the crack from propagating. Although the fuselage failed after a number of cycles that represented 3 times the life of GALYP at the time of the accident, it was still much earlier than expected. 115. A further test reproduced the same results. 116. Based on these findings, Comet 1 structural failures could be expected at anywhere from 1000 to 9,000 cycles. Before the Elba accident, GALYP had made 1,290 pressurized flights, while GALYY had made 900 pressurized flights before crashing. Dr. P.B. Walker, head of the structures department at the RAE, said he was not surprised by this, noting that the difference was about 3 to 1, and previous experience with metal fatigue suggested a total range of 9 to 1 between experiment and outcome in the field called assault in failure. 113. The RAE also reconstructed about 2/3 of GALYP at Farnborough and found fatigue crack growth from a rivet hole at the low drag fiberglass forward aperture around the automatic direction finder, which had caused a catastrophic breakup of the aircraft in high-altitude flight. 117. The exact origin of the fatigue failure could not be identified but was localized to the ADF antenna cutout, a countersunk bolt hole and manufacturing damage that had been repaired at the time of construction using methods that were common but were likely insufficient, allowing for the stresses involved, were both located along the failure crack. 118. Once the crack initiated, the skin failed from the point of the ADF cutout and propagated downward sound rearwards along a stringer, resulting in an explosive decompression. 119. Image, Fig 12, from the Cohen Inquiry showing the location of the ADF antenna cut out windows in the roof above the cockpit of Comet 1 GALYP. Was also found that the punch rivet construction technique we employed in the Comet's design had exacerbated its structural fatigue problems. Winking sad smiley 98. The aircraft's windows had been engineered toed glued and riveted, but had been punch riveted only. Unlike drill riveting, the imperfect nature of the hole created by punch riveting could cause fatigue cracks to start developing around the rivet. Principal investigator Hall accepted the RAE's conclusion of designand construction flaws as the likely explanation for GALYP's structural failure after 3060 pressurization cycles. N20, earlier structural indications. The issue of the lightness of Comet 1 construction, in order to not tax the relatively low-thrust de Havilland Ghost engines, had been admitted by de Havilland test pilot John Wilson, while flying the prototype during a Farnborough fly-past in 1949. On the flight, he was accompanied by Chris Beaumont, chief test pilot of the de Havilland Engine Company, who stood in the entrance to the cockpit behind the flight engineer. He stated every time we pulled 21/2-3G to go around the corner, Chris found that the floor on which he was standing, bulging up, and there was a loud bang at that speed from the nose of the aircraft where the skin panted, flexed, so when we heard this bang we knew without checking the airspeed indicator, that we were doing 340 knots. In later years we realized that these were the indications of how flimsy the structure really was. 121. Square window myths. surviving de Havilland Comet 1 showing rectangular windows with rounded corners not square as commonly described. Despite findings of the Cohen inquiry, a number of myths have evolved around the cause of the Comet 1's accidents. Most commonly quoted are the square passenger windows. While the airport noted that stress around fuselage cutouts, emergency exit side windows was found to be much higher than expected due to Havilland's assumptions and testing methods. 122. The passenger window's shape has been commonly misunderstood and cited as a cause of the fuselage failure. In fact, the mention of windows in the Cohen report's conclusion refers specifically to the origin point of failure in the ADF antenna cutout windows, located above the cockpit, not passenger windows. 123. The shape of the passenger windows were not indicated in any failure mode detailed in the accident report and were not viewed as a contributing factor. A number of other pressurized airliners of the period, including the Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, Douglas DC-7, and DC-8, had larger, more square windows than the Comet 1 and experienced no such failures. 124. In fact, the Comet 1's window general shape resembles a slightly larger Boeing 737 window mounted horizontally. They are rectangular, not square, have rounded corners, and are within 5% of the radius of the Boeing 737 windows and virtually identical to modern airliners. 124. Paul Wythe, professor of casting at the University of Birmingham School of Metallurgy, states in a video presentation delivered in 2019, analyzing all available data, that the fact that de Havilland put oval windows into later marks is not because of any squareness of the windows that caused failure. 125. De Havilland went to oval windows on the subsequent marks because it was easier to reduce them in, use adhesive, nothing to do with the stress concentration, and it's purely to remove rivets from the structure. 126. Surviving Comet 1s can be seen on view at the IAF Museum Cosford and the de Havilland Museum at Salisbury Hall, London. Coney. Response. In responding to the report, de Havilland stated, "Now that the danger of high-level fatigue in pressure cabins has been generally appreciated, de Havilland's will take adequate measures to deal with this problem. To this end, we propose to use thicker gauge materials in the pressure cabin area and to strengthen and redesign windows and cutouts, and so lower the general stress to a level at which local stress concentrations either at rivets and bolt holes or as such may occur by reason of cracks caused accidentally during manufacture or subsequently, will not constitute a danger." 127. The Cohen inquiry closed on the 24th of November, 1954, having found that the basic design of the Comet was sound. 111, and made no observations or recommendations regarding the shape of the windows. De Havilland nonetheless began a refit program to strengthen the fuselage and wing structure, employing thicker gauge skin and replacing the rectangular windows and panels with rounded versions, although this was not related to the erroneous square window claim, as can be seen by the fact that the fuselage escape hatch cutouts, the source of the failure in test aircraft GRU, retained their rectangular shape. 110, 128. Following the Comet inquiry, aircraft were designed to fail safe or safe life standards. 129. Several subsequent catastrophic fatigue failures, such as Aloha Airlines Flight 243 of the 28th of April, 1988 Havio Curragh. 130. Resumption of service. Malaysia-Singapore Airlines Comet 4 at Kai Tak Airport in 1966. With the discovery of the structural problems of the early series, all remaining Comets were withdrawn from service, while de Havilland launched a major effort to build a new version that would be both larger and stronger. All outstanding orders for the Comet 2 were cancelled by airline customers. 63. All production Comet 2s were also modified with thicker gauge skin to better distribute loads and alleviate the fatigue problems. Most of these served with the RAF as the Comet C2. A program to produce a Comet 2 with more powerful avons was delayed. The prototype Comet 3 first flew in July 1954 and was tested in an unpressurized state pending completion of the Cohen inquiry. 63. Comet commercial flights would not resume until 1958. 131. Development flying and route proving with the Comet 3 allowed accelerated certification of what was destined to be the most successful variant of the type, the Comet 4. All airline customers for the Comet 3 subsequently cancelled their orders and switched to the Comet 4, 63, which was based on the Comet 3 Butte with improved fuel capacity. Borg ordered 19 Comet 4s in March 1955, and American operator Capital Airlines ordered 14 Comets in July 1956. 132. Capital's order included 10 Comet 4s, a variant modified for short-range operations with a stretched fuselage and short wings, lacking the pinion, outboard wing, fuel tanks of the Comet 4. 83. Financial problems and a takeover by United Airlines meant that Capital would never operate the Comet. United Arab Airlines Comet 4C at Geneva Airport in 1968. The Comet 4 first flew on the 27th of April 1958 and received its certificate of airworthiness on the 24th of September 1958. The first was delivered to BOAC the next day. 133. 134. The base price of a new Comet 4 was roughly £1.14 million, £24.81 million in 2019. 135. The Comet 4 enabled Borg to inaugurate the first regular jet-powered transatlantic services on the 4th of October 1958 between London and New York, albeit still requiring a fuel stop at Gander International Airport, Newfoundland, on westward North Atlantic crossings. 69. While Borg gained publicity as the first to provide transatlantic jet service, by the end of the month rival Pan American World Airways was flying the Boeing 707 on the New York-Paris route with a fuel stop at Gander in both directions. 136. And in 1960 began flying Douglas DC-8s on its transatlantic routes as well. The American jets were larger, faster, longer-ranged and more cost-effective than the Comet. 137. After analyzing route structures for the Comet, Borg reluctantly cast about for a successor, and in 1956 entered into an agreement with Boeing to purchase the 707. 138. Comet 4 of East African Airways at London Heathrow in 1964. The Comet 4 was ordered by two other airlines. Aerolíneas Argentinas took delivery of 6 Comet 4s from 1959 to 1960, using them between Buenos Aires and Santiago, New York and Europe, and East African Airways received 3 new Comet 4s from 1960 to 1962 and operated them to the United Kingdom and to Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. 139. The Comet 4AM ordered by Capital Airlines was instead built for B as the Comet 4B, with a further fuselage stretch of 38 in, 970 mm, and seating for 99 passengers. The first Comet 4B flew on the 27th of June, 1959 and B began Tel Aviv to London Heathrow services on the 1st of April 1960. 140. Olympic Airways was the only other customer to order the type. 141. The last Comet 4 variant, the Comet 4C, first flew on the 31st of October 1959 and entered service with Mexicana in 1960. 142. The Comet 4C had the Comet 4B's longer fuselage and longer wings and extra fuel tanks of the original Comet 4, which gave it a longer range than the 4B. Ordered by Kuwait Airways, Middle East Airlines, Misrair, later United Arab Airlines, and Sudan Airways, it was the most popular Comet variant. 82, 143, later service. Comet 4C canopus on display.